Okay, so this is your intro to area and surface area. But welcome back to the drive-thru, everyone. Sponsored as always by the Deli. The Deli is taking part in the fourth quarter weight loss challenge, so hopefully you'll see me transform this quarter and dominate this Fat Club challenge. But for today, we're going to eat donuts because we don't weigh in until 12:30. Donuts and pizza today as we get started. I think this is as much as I've weighed in quite a long time. I am. I'm going to drink water, not pee, and try to trick the scales. Okay, so I know. We'll see who's right. All right, so I just handed you your Ohio Department of Education state test reference sheet. So let me help you read through this, okay? I will tell you that from my experience, there is very little of this stuff on the test. You don't know what a radian is, and I have to teach you that before we take the test. So that's going to be at the end of next week, beginning of that third week, okay? Hopefully everything else on this list you're very familiar with. And just since you guys are smart and curious, a radian is a different way to measure a degree, okay? It's a different way to measure an angle. But radians deal more with rotational angles, meaning if I spun around twice, how many degrees would that be? Come on, you ex-gamers. That'd be a 720, okay? If I spun around two complete rotations. I guess I should have been more specific. Okay, well that would be 4 pi radians. It's just a different way to measure it. So one complete rotation is 2 pi radians, and I'll explain it to you. But if you think about it, it's one complete circumference, because what's 2 pi r? So it's kind of a way to equate circumference with rotation, okay? I'll get to it. Don't even worry about it. It's not what we're talking about at all today. Okay, this should be reassuring to some of you guys that have screwed these up because they have them on there for you. So specifically these two. If you get the 30-60-90s confused with the 45-45-90s, well then they have that there. And here's your SOHCAHTOA listed out, okay? None of this has anything to do with this week, but it's good to introduce you to it. We've already done all that stuff but radians. Okay, this is the part of the sheet that you're going to need to use for the next couple weeks, okay? You've already seen this before. Now I've given you the full. So what you have to do is you got to read this capital letter here, and then you also have to read the key. This is the area of a triangle. So for some reason they don't make you learn the area of a triangle, okay? This is the area of a parallelogram. Keep in mind a parallelogram is not length times width. What is it? It's base times height, and there's a difference. Okay? There is. The height of a parallelogram is not usually, I guess you could consider it the width, but it's not a dimension of the parallelogram. It's not a side length. Okay? Circumference of a circle is 2 pi r. We will be using that to find the lateral area of a cylinder, okay? So these first 4 are circumference and area. These last 5 are all volume. The volume will actually be the easiest. The surface area is going to trip you up a little bit, and that's why we're going to spend 2 days here, 3 days here going over area and surface area, okay? So let's start by thinking, what in the heck is area? So, anyone know? Excellent, Jess. It is the amount of squares inside of a what dimensional figure? A two-dimensional figure. Two-dimensional, okay? That's going to be the confusing part, is because some of these things are three-dimensional, but we're going to take their two-dimensional measure, okay, which is totally fine. So, let's say I cut grass for a living, which is not a bad living, okay? Would I charge everybody the same amount to cut their grass? Anyone have any idea how you might want to charge people differently? It's really dependent on 2 or 3 things. Sam? Right. You're going to want to focus on the square footage. Now, I don't want you to think that guys that cut grass walk out with a tape measure and like measure every single blade, every square inch. That's not how they do it. They do it with an estimate, okay? But it's obvious to know that I would want to charge. Oh no, here we go again. Oh dear. I think the pen has run out. Bad timing. We're going to have to try to do this with my mouse. This is a house, by the way. Uh-oh. Okay, so hopefully you... No. This is somebody's plot of land. Okay? So hopefully you understand that I would charge more to the person with the blue area than the red area if these things were drawn to scale. But you also might want to consider mulch beds. See, this is the actual real lesson. If this guy had a ton of mulch beds on his property, do you know what guys that cut grass professionally have to do to these mulch beds? They have to walk around them with a trimmer and trim all the edges. Then they got to walk around with a backpack blower and blow all the grass out the mulch beds. So if you had like all these mulch beds in your house, these two actually might have a similar cost. So you're actually paying, excuse me, you are paying by the time it takes the person to cut your grass. A proper prediction for how much time it might take you to cut your grass is how much grass do I have to cut, plus how much edging do I have to do, plus how much blowing do I have to do. That's the real way it would happen, just so you know. Okay? But surface area is a big part of that. Okay? So how do we measure it? It literally, we count up the squares. And this is where math comes from. Okay? So originally, someone wanted to be like, how many squares are in there? And so they started just counting. Okay, they would literally count how many of those little squares were in the big rectangle, and that would be our square area. And then someone else was like, well, if you can imagine that these were grids, and we had a bunch of grids, those grids would create a bunch of what? They would create a bunch of squares. So instead of using counting, what do? They use multiply, because that's a much faster way to add up a bunch of things, is to multiply them. Okay? Well, maybe now you understand why it's very difficult, very difficult to get a circle and have its area be a nice number. Because you have to multiply by pi to get how many squares there are on the inside of that thing. And pi is a very not nice number. Now, since we just did celebrate pi, let me make sure you guys understand what pi is. Okay? That's not the best circle because I drew it on a widescreen, so it kind of looks like it's been like kind of stretched vertically. So here, let me do this. Tell me when it looks better. Okay? All right. So, if we had a really, really accurate measurement of a string that went all the way around the perimeter of that circle, okay? So this is a great activity. We should have done it on Pi Day, but unfortunately, we're supposed to leave this activity for your 7th grade teachers. But I used to do it when I was a 9th grade teacher, and I taught lower level kids. Sorry, a 10th grade teacher. And so we would go around the school with strings and measure the circumferences of as many circles as we possibly could. Do you understand that that red string represents the circumference? Well, then if you came back, and if you made, here we go again. Well, that's going to make today interesting. If you made a chart, and on this chart you had circumference here, and then on the second line of the chart you had the diameter here. So you measured your diameter with a ruler, you measured your circumference with a ruler and a string, and then in this chart here you did your circumference and you divided it by your diameter. Do you have any idea what would go in this chart? What would go here in this column? It would be pi. You'd get a bunch of numbers that were very, very close to 3.14159. The better you were at measuring, the closer your numbers would be. Okay? So what the heck is pi? Let's see if this works. Pi is literally circumference divided by diameter. And how are circles related? They're similar. Remember that? Are they all the exact same shape? Same shape, different size, right? So pi is this magical number that represents the relationship or the ratio between the circumference and the diameter of every single circle in the entire world. It just happens to be that way. Now, why does it repeat forever? I don't know. That's kind of a crazy mystery of math that people are still trying to figure out. It's one of the few numbers, I shouldn't say repeat forever because that's a really bad way to explain it, that doesn't repeat forever but keeps going on without repeating. It's an irrational number. Okay? But that's it. That's all pi is. It's the circumference divided by the diameter. Okay? All right, so a few more things for the intro, and then we'll be done. So how do we get a two-dimensional measurement out of a three-dimensional object? Well, let me just... How many dimensions is that shape? 2. Can you measure the width? So the width is just part of the measurement. It's one-dimensional. So how many dimensions is that shape? Does it have two-dimensional parts? How many two-dimensional parts does it have? 6. Okay, adding up the areas of those 6 parts is how you find the surface area. Does that make sense? What type of profession might care about surface area? We said that lawnmowers might care about area. What type of profession might care about surface area? Anyone? Painters. Excellent. That's literally the exact one I was thinking of. If you paint for a living, then you paint walls and ceilings. Hopefully not floors, because you're a bad painter if you're painting the floor. You're really not supposed to do that. That's why they have drop cloths. Okay? So you've got to measure the walls, but then hopefully you use some common sense, because in a normal room, at least one wall will be congruent to the other one, right? The walls that are across from each other are supposed to be congruent, unless you built them. Got it? So that's all you're doing. Now, surface area will get a little weird when we get into objects like this. But you just got to use your imagination. What's the top and bottom? First of all, what's that thing called? It's called a cylinder. What shapes are the top and bottom? Circles. What shape's the side? It's a rectangle. Excellent. You see it? There it is. If you're watching this YouTube video, you're missing out on that. You just cut the rectangle down, and then there you go. You turn it into a rectangle. So how do you find the area of a rectangle? Base times height. What is the length of the base of this rectangle that I'm holding in my hand? It's the circumference. So the surface area of a cylinder, well, how many circles are there? So it's 2 pi r squared. What's the circumference of a circle? Pi d. For my rap career, I'm going to leave this as 2 pi r and then do h. And I only say that because this just sounds better when you're making a rap song about it. 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. It just kind of flows better. You could also say that it's 2 pi r squared plus pi dh. Just doesn't flow as well for your rhymes. Sam? Yeah, absolutely, Sam. This object has how many dimensions? How many dimensions? It's three-dimensional. Okay? We are trying to un-three-dimensionalize it and turn it into a flat figure. Well, when we do that, our flat figure happens to look like that. I think you understand this part pretty well, right? There's two circles that are flat on that object. Well, what you would do, and again, this is, I can't do this in a video, but if I cut this part right here and then unzipped it and flattened it out, this rectangle, or this shape, would turn into a rectangle. The height of that rectangle would be h. This thing right here, oh, here we go again, Sam. This thing right here would represent the base of the rectangle, right? Well, that would be this. Does that make sense? That's the length of that rectangle, and that's the circumference. So that's where I got the 2 pi r from. So this is 2 pi r down here. 2 pi r times h. Okay? Alright, the only other thing I want you to understand is what the word lateral means. I think we've already covered that in here a lot. Okay? If I'd made like some gemstone like that. What does lateral mean? If your coach tells you he wants to work, or he wants you to work on your lateral motion, what's your coach, he or she, telling you? Serby? Side to side. What if you're lifting weights and your trainer says we're going to work on your lat muscles today? You know where those are? They're these things underneath your armpits. Okay? So, well, your obliques are below your lats. Okay? So, what does lateral mean? It just means sides. It's just Latin for sides. So lateral area would be the area of all these rectangles. So it means take off the bases. That's what lateral area means. You got it? All right, you guys are good to start your little review. It's a 2-day assignment. Can I get a boom? Boom! Welcome back, boom.